Hello everyone, welcome to our new webinar. This time we're going to talk about sex workers of color and the support that we at NAM can and have been showing over the years. So first of all, we think it is very important for us to stress that we fully support the Black Lives Matter movement, and we want to clarify right now our position with the police in response to this. We also have a new survey to help improve our own services tailored to sex workers of color, so that we'd like to introduce and get some community feedback on that survey. And with this in mind, let's start. Let me first tell you about what has been happening at NAM in terms of people of color. NAM as an organization is mostly white. There is one Black person in the organization. She's in the position of high power and her presence is not tokenistic. But apart from that, much as we strive for diversity and inclusivity, everybody else is white, and we would really want to improve that. Which is why we have developed this survey, and we want to have input from sex workers of color and other minority backgrounds. We want to hear what exactly we can do for you as an organization, for you as people of color and as sex workers. I also think it's important to stress that we don't actually have the demographics data on sex workers as NAM members. When NAM was founded as an organization, it was founded by white people, and at the time, collecting the demographics data on sex workers who were members of NAM probably did not feel as an important issue to the people who ran NAM at the time. So when you fill in the application form, there is no question about your ethnicity or color or background. However, this has been an issue for the past couple of years. And when we applied for funding to redevelop the whole website and make all the services that we provide at the moment digitally available, that was one of the issues. And if all goes well with our digital build, hopefully by the end of this year, you will be able to see the new and improved membership application form, which actually has the questions on demographics. Feel free to answer those questions or skip them if you don't feel like it. Also, speaking about sex workers, NAM members, we need to point out that COVID-19 has actually exposed the great differences between sex workers who have access to the government support and other support structures in place, and the sex workers who have none or limited access to support and services, whether that's because of their immigration status or whether that's because of their color. And it was heartbreaking occasionally for specifically case workers to have the same people with no status calling them again and again for food vouchers. To highlight, NAM is still giving out food vouchers. All you need to do is get in touch with us and you get your food voucher. And on this note, NAM supports all sex workers, including those who do not have access to support structures or criminal justice pathways. And regardless of your sexuality, gender, or color, NAM support does not mean police involvement. From the first moment you get in touch with NAM, everything that NAM caseworkers or other people at NAM do to support you is done with your consent. If you consent to having your details passed to the police, and if you want to pursue the criminal justice pathway, you're welcome to do so, and you will be supported throughout the whole procedure. However, if all you want to do is to report the crime against you and maybe alert other sex workers in the area about the person who committed the crime against you, then that's all that happens, and your details do not go anywhere further than that. NAM is also one of the very few organizations in Europe that collects anonymized data on crimes against sex workers. That is all done, again, in a very anonymized way and with your opinion in mind. If what you reported is removal of condom, then that crime against you will never enter the database as rape. It will be held there as a removal of condom. How you perceive the crime against you and how it affected you does not get changed. And your data never goes into the database. All this is, so NAM at the moment has a number of years of data like that, and it is used to end violence against all sex workers. And on this note, we want to say that input from specifically sex workers of color is important to us at NAM. We have recently had a number of job opportunities, and we found it very difficult to reach the communities of sex workers of color to make sure that they apply for these positions. And we know that there are so many brilliant sex workers of color out there who could do wonderful things here at NAM and help us develop services tailored specifically for sex workers of color. But we just don't know how to reach these people. You can get in touch with us, tweet at us, comment on this YouTube video, get in touch with our caseworkers, fill in our survey, and leave your contact details. We want to have contact with you so that we can make sure that as an organization, we're more welcoming and supportive specifically to you. And without your input, this is going to be much harder for us to do. And now let's talk about the police.
Right, thank you. So as we've just discussed and as we've just heard, we are quite a white team, and we do not want to explain racism in any way, shape or form. We are not trying to retell any stories that aren't ours to tell. However, what we can do is use numbers to give some insight into structural racism and mistreatment of sex workers in the UK, specifically by the police. In order to do this, for this slide, we have used various references to put it together, but we also ran into the very obvious issue that there is a lack of data collected on the British states. So there's quite a few things on the United States, but there is very little numerical evidence on the United Kingdom, especially on the intersection of sex work and race and the relationship of sex workers of colour and Black sex workers with the police. There is, however, a lot of anecdotal evidence, and we do recommend checking out the website and also social media of the English Collective of Prostitutes, ECP, which is going to be linked down in the description box, and which probably a lot of you already know. They are great with collecting stories and evidence on police and sex workers. So the first thing I would like to talk about is police practice more generally. So the militarization of the police, there are a few indications that this is happening at the moment. So Maeve McDowell and Brian Christopher wrote an amazing guest article for NetPol. NetPol stands for the Network for Police Monitoring. They're also linked down below in the description box, and they write a really interesting article on the use of rubber and plastic bullets in Northern Ireland, because in the media we hear a lot about the British police not using rubber bullets at all. So there's a lot of interesting history on the use of rubber bullets in Northern Ireland, especially in Derry and that area, so at the borders. Also in April of 2016, the NPCC, so the police in England and Wales, have announced that they are training around 1,500 extra firearm officers to help protect the public from terrorism. And there is also evidence from the Centre for Crime and Justice that there are 22,000 more prison places in England and Wales and 3,600 more in Scotland that are planned. We also see an increase of immigration authorities having more powers. There's, for example, the mobile fingerprint checkers, and there's a campaign against it, which is called Stop the Scan, Stop the Scandal. It is also linked down below in the description box if you want to check it out. In terms of protests, there is some evidence from police response to protests, especially from Netpol, which I've just mentioned earlier. So especially with the Black Lives Matter protests, there is some evidence that police tactics were used to disrupt those protests. For example, the kettling at a Black Lives Matter protest in London earlier this year was unlawful. There is also a lot of evidence of abuse of police powers and discrimination against disabled people at the Extinction Rebellion protests. Netpol is currently collecting stories and accounts from protesters at the Black Lives Matter protests, especially from Black people and people of colour. The website where they're looking for that is in the description box as well. If you have something to contribute, if you've run into any situations that you would like to talk about at one of the Black Lives Matter protests anywhere in the country. Now, the next point, structural racism inside the British police. There's also a lot of evidence that can be found there. So a lot of the evidence comes from the Northern Police Monitoring Project, the NPMP. It is an independent grassroots organisation working to build community resistance against police violence, harassment and racism. They're, as the name suggests, operating in the north, specifically in Manchester and Greater Manchester, and they very clearly identify that there is systemic institutional racism in the police force. So they've published a report that Black protesters were nearly 4 times more likely to be stopped and searched at the protests in Greater Manchester between September 2018 and February 2019. They've shown that per 1,000 residents, there were less than, so 0.63 white people stopped and searched, but at the same time, there were 4.26 Black or Black British people stopped and searched. There's also, so mixed race people and Asian or British Asian people were also stopped and searched more often than white people. So there is like a clear, and like this data is from police.uk. On top of that, there is generally very little evidence that body searches have any significant impact on decreasing serious crime. Another study from Patrick Williams from the Manchester Metropolitan University shows that 89% of the Manchester's gang base of the police is not white, while 78% of serious youth violence is actually committed by white British people. Also kind of shows the racial profiling and how Black people and people of colour are being put into like the gang database a lot quicker than white people would ever do. There is also from the Lamy report, and there are some articles in a few media outlets like the Guardian, for example, about the Lamy report, which shows that while there are about 3% of the overall population are Black, the prison population there it's 12%. So also quite clear that Black people are targeted a lot more by the criminal justice system. And then what might be really interesting in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment is that the proportion of custody deaths of people of colour where restrained or force are featured are 2 times higher. So the Inquest Casework and Monitoring Organisation have been collecting data on the death of police custody through police shootings, pursuit, and road and trafficking incidents. And while they show that about 14% of deaths in police custody are from Black or minority ethnic background, which corresponds with the number that we've just heard with like 12%, that's quite close. However, in those institutions where restraints or force is a feature, people of color or Black people are over 2 times more likely to die in custody, and nearly 2 times more likely to die in custody in institutions where mental health related issues are a feature. So specifically, there is another report from the United Nations that data from the Metropolitan Police that was released in August of 2017 found that people of African descent and ethnic minority background, especially young African and Caribbean men, are twice as likely to die after the use of force by a police officer and the subsequent lack of insufficiency of access to appropriate healthcare. I think this is quite a clear link to what happened to George Floyd, and how the media is portraying that this could not happen in the UK, and that the UK is innocent. Like, there's clear data showing that this is happening, and that Black people and people of color are dying more often in police custody, especially when there is restraint or force as a feature. Looking further into the relationship between sex work and police, as I've said earlier, it is a little bit difficult to get numerical data on this. So we're relying a lot on the data of the English Collective Prostitutes. They have published that government statistics show that between 2013 and 2017, there were 1,695 people arrested for loitering and soliciting, and 842 for brothel keeping and controlling. That is quite a lot of people, and the vast majority of them were women. Also in the last bulletin, so the ECP publishes bulletins every year about raids and arrests and soliciting, and just like generally the relationship of the police and sex workers. And in the last one, which went from November 2018 to October 2019, there were more than 14 raids, at least 4 closures of brothels or flats, nearly 30 arrests, and over 30 people were taken in for safeguarding, even though it is a little bit unclear what that means. We do recommend checking out the bulletins anyway, because they're a great overview of police and sex worker interactions in the UK. The ECP has also found that the police directly profits off raids, that half of all assets or cash that's seized under the proceeds of crime law is used by police forces. Generally, the ECP stresses that prostitution laws are implemented in a racist way, and that sex workers of color and Black sex workers are targeted directly. There is, however, no UK-based evidence on this. There is some data from the US that shows that while Black people make up about 13.2% of the overall population, they make up 42% of all prostitution arrests, which is quite a lot. And that data comes from the US Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Criminal Justice Information Service Division. So quite official data. Overall, I think this gives a little bit, I'm sorry this was so much information, but I think it gives like a little bit of an overview of what is happening in the UK, and that there is a clear issue with racial injustice inside the police as an institution in the UK, and that also sex workers have quite a strained relationship with the police in the United Kingdom.
Okay, so I guess I'll take over there. Thank you. So in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, we wanted to, review ourselves and what we've, said we are going to do, and how we're going on with that. So we've made a new pledge. We reviewed this specifically as part of our response to Black Lives Matter, we wanted to make it absolutely crystal clear what our engagement with the police forces are. We wanted to lay that out for you, as we know that this is an important issue both for our members as sex workers and as people of colour. So we've laid it out into what we will and won't do and what we expect. I'm covering what we will do. So we're going to aim to provide professional support services to sex workers based on the harms that they identify. And that's an important thing to note. All of our support services and all of our services and signposting to mainstream services are informed by the victims, and what you say you need, we will try and provide. We're also going to be advocating for equitable access to police and courts, and facilitate sex workers' access to mainstream services, again, in ways determined by the victim. We want to make this as easy as possible for our members, and we want to try and make sure that they are treated well by the system if they are in it, if they decide to take part in it. We're also engaging in community education of police, so we can help improve the quality of services they can offer to sex workers. And also we are happy to distribute any intelligence given to us by police about potentially dangerous clients to our members as a safeguarding method.
Right, there are a few things that we will definitely not do and are not doing in our relationship with the police. One of them is that we will not engage with further criminalization of voluntary adult sex industries. So if third parties are being criminalized further, if there's any kind of execution of criminalization, we will not directly engage or benefit from it. We will also not provide, and this links in with what we've talked about in the first slide, we will not provide any information about our members or any other sex worker that reports to us. So this is all based on consent. Whatever you give us as information, if you do not want it to be shared with the police, we will not share it with the police. And this links in with the next point. We will not support or cooperate with the police on outreach and mapping exercises. So we will also not provide them with information about the wider sex working community and where they are based and who they are and like all of these things. That is information that we will not give out to the police directly or indirectly. So we will not help them to collect information about the sex working communities. And then the last point links in with the knowledge transfer or community education that has just been mentioned, where we will not undervalue the expertise of sex workers that has been put into the development and also the delivery of these community education packages, so that this is generally something that is paid for by the police forces. In cases where that is not the case, where either they are not willing to or cannot pay for the community packages, we will make sure that we get the funding for them for these things from other parts of the police, of the wider police force or policing force, in order to make sure that the people, especially the sex workers who are delivering this kind of training or community education, are being paid and compensated for their work and expertise.
And what we expect from police? Well, I mean, that hasn't changed, although sometimes police tactics seem to change time to time. So we're expecting a high quality, consistent, predictable police response to sex worker victimization across all police force areas. So that takes a little bit of communication with the different areas and seeing how different ones are taking different approaches with all of it. We're expecting that initiatives that are we're expecting that initiatives that the police force take target those who harm sex workers, clearly stating that those people will not be getting away after hurting sex workers. So it's about making sure that the targeting is around the perpetrators who go after sex workers rather than sex workers themselves. So that's the initiatives that we're hoping that they're sort of coming up with. We're hoping that they have a commitment learning from a diverse sex worker base, so including people from sexual minorities, people of colour, migrant sex workers, all the different marginalised communities bring expertise, and we're hoping that the police force can learn and work with these communities better rather than against them. We're hoping that the police forces will take up the NPCC guidelines for policing sex work and prostitution. That's sort of how their terminology is on all of this, because there's some useful structures in there for helping them identify sort of misnomers around police, around sex work versus what's sort of going on in a bit. We're hoping that they, well, it's more like it's more than just hoping, it's what we're expecting them to do, is we're expecting them to pursue a more nuanced understanding of victims' narratives and the benefits and limitations which come from, again, understanding that sex workers can be in a range of complex situations. It takes time and investing in that to be able to understand and work out the specifics with it, rather than sort of clumping things together. We're expecting that they have an awareness of distinctions between trafficking and sex work and the full spectrum of exploitation. So that's going to be sort of an ongoing piece of work, because so frequently so many of these topics are sort of conflated together, and there's a number of harms that come from this. So when you're looking at things individually, pulling apart and getting into the details of all of that can be really helpful to be able to make sure that generalizations aren't passing to the police force. It's also really important that we start talking to them and understand, making sure that the expectations of the police are that they understand that third parties around sex workers can sometimes be beneficial, can sometimes be helpful for us as sex workers. Sometimes it can ease where there's language barriers, it can provide extra security. I know the sort of terminology around third parties can be slightly vague, and there obviously can be areas where people need support within that, but not sort of clumping it all together again and saying, okay, well, third parties are inherently this or that. When you sort of generalize, and you're not making, you're not giving opportunities for individuals where they're at, and you're making a lot of assumptions. So this brings me on to the next point, which is our digital build. Which is quite exciting. So our digital build is basically, we're looking through all of our internal, external sort of systems, how we sort of how you interact with us on the websites, how sex workers are getting alerts from us, how sex workers can report. So it's looking at all of our sort of structure, seeing how we can optimize it, where we can save staff time to be able to better use staff time in better sort of person-focused care. And to do all of this, we've received some lottery funding, which has been a helpful amount to be able to keep the project off and actually really achieve this. The aims are about improving all the services, so it's responding to communities in new ways and being able to see what ways different parts of the communities are better accessed with different are accessed better with different sorts of approaches. So sometimes that might be something like in phone texts, sometimes it could be emails, it can be a number of different ways that are sort of being explored currently. We need to get more information about demographics that are signing up with us. Again, this is going to be optional input, but this type of input helps us better understand our membership and how we can better serve our membership. So those options are going to be added into our system, and we recognize that it wasn't something which we've been doing so far, but it's something which we recognise as a mistake and needs to be something that needs to be added. Since 2018, this is where we sort of started looking at all of these, and we've started proposing these changes. So it isn't directly in response to the most recent events, but it's been something that we've recognised needs massive improvements, and that's when we sort of did the grant application writing and coordinating strategies for it, so that we're able to make something that's long-lasting and sustainable, as opposed to something that's a little bit more reactive. But this whole process has been built by sex workers, with sort of many meetings where sex workers have been collaborating in and sort of sharing ideas and input, and making sure that the services that are written about us involve us in the decision making throughout. And this is why opportunities of people with diverse backgrounds is a really great next step to be able to have an impact in NUM.
Okay, so coming back to what we are launching today is our brand new shiny survey. We have links available in the description box. It will also be posted on our Twitter. So this is important. We have just been talking about the ways that we have struggled to engage with communities of colour and the ways that we are trying to fix it. This survey is only for sex workers of colour. Any of the questions that you feel like you don't want to answer or you're uncomfortable with, you're more than welcome to leave. You can do that if it is more comfortable for you. But we really wanted to get an idea of some of your experiences, not only with NUM, but experiences with UK police, and opinions and stories that we can use to help inform our services, both to police and to members. So there will be opportunities for this to go on and be turned into focus groups, and there will be an option at the end if you would like to leave your email to be included in any future projects that we are doing around this theme. There will be, again, specifically for sex workers of colour, you can put as much as little time into it as you like. This is just us asking very nicely for your opinions and for your experiences. Yeah, thank you.
This is where we're going to finish. If you want to report a crime against you, or if you need a food voucher, you can get in touch with our caseworkers. You can see their contact details and their work hours on the screen right now. Obviously, you can email at any time, not just those working hours. And please, it's not just the focus groups, it's other paid opportunities for sex workers of colour to have input into how NUM is run and how we can improve the services that we provide to our members, and specifically members of colour. We really want to have more access to communities of sex workers of colour. So get in touch, it will be really important to us. Thank you and stay safe. Bye.
Bye.